It's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field. Or the run rules on the diamond at Lowe's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. It's the Mainline Podcast. Thanks for making us a part of your weekly routine here on Red Dirt Media with the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. Tyler, what are we talking about tonight?
Got a fantastic rundown, Adam. Freshman phenom highlights coming out of spring practice here for OU football. We're going to touch on a couple of guys that are standing out so far. On the offensive side of the football, we had a scrimmage a few days ago, a couple guys standing out. The transfer portal rears its ugly head once again for OU men's basketball. Porter Mosier, God love him. A lot of thoughts and prayers need to go out to him right now with what he's going to have to be able to put together for this basketball program going forward. We'll touch on Javion McCollum hitting the portal, what that kind of means for Oklahoma. Kind of got a little bit of news today. Got an interesting quote from President Harris talking about the current status of the future home of the OU men's and women's basketball program. So we'll touch on that here in a little bit. Adam's optimism makes a return on tonight's episode with OU baseball, and then wash, rinse, repeat. Same thing. OU softball kicks ass. Another sweep up there in Lawrence. The look ahead to this upcoming top 5 showdown series in Austin, Texas. So we're going to touch on all that, Adam. But first and foremost, how are things down there in Oklahoma City?
Well, it doesn't feel like springtime right now, but, hey, OU baseball, I saw Sooner Cowboys there in the chat saying that tonight is not a must win, but they need a win. They desperately need a win before they have to Stillwater. We're going to talk about baseball here a little bit later in the show, but hey, if baseball can get a win, it'll start feeling like springtime again, and I'll be a little bit more optimistic, unforced, like Adam's optimism, the opposite there, which is kind of ironic there. It's forced. So let's start with football, though, because we've had several spring practices now, and we're starting to hear a little bit about a freshman that is coming in and really catching a lot of eyeballs on what he's able to do in practice, and that's Michael Hawkins Jr., the quarterback out of Frisco. Allen, he played in a few different places in high school. We'll have some of his clips rolling here in a second, but he's a guy that obviously, I feel like he's kind of a mystery type of guy in the sense of how he's come into OU. He was highly ranked by On3, by ESPN, 247 had him a little bit lower. So, he's just kind of a little interesting, guy there. He doesn't have as much, praise as a Jackson Arnold or maybe even a Kevin Sperry, but he's clearly got a high ceiling. It's just where is he going to fit? And so far, he's impressed.
Yeah, On3 had him as a 4-star quarterback. 247 was a little bit more down on him. They had him as a 3-star, the 259th overall rated player, in the high school class that he was a part of. And Adam, coming out of Frisco Emerson High School down there in McKinney, it was thought by many that coming out of high school that he was going to be a guy that was going to be a project that was going to take 1, maybe even 2 years of development before he was ready to play at this level. But from all the reports that have been out there, from some of the clips and from some of the chatter that we've been getting, regarding some of these practices and the scrimmage that went down, over the weekend in Norman. I mean, this dude has been absolutely balling in spring practice, which is a surprise to some, not to us here on the Mainline Podcast. When you look at what this kid was able to do in high school, whether it was at Allen, whether it was at Frisco Emerson, this is a guy that was extremely accurate in high school. That was probably the biggest knock on this kid coming out of high school. It wasn't the arm talent. He can make every throw on the field, but it was, time and time again over the course of 4 quarters of play, the accuracy was a little bit of an issue. But it kind of feels like, him working with Seth Luttrell, some of the other coaches on staff, the accuracy issues have been, kind of gone away, since he's been on campus here in Norman. But really good arm strength, fundamentally sound, great football, and recognition in the pocket. And he is a absolute nightmare, as some of the highlights that we're playing right here on YouTube are alluding to. Once this kid gets outside of the pocket and he's able to really make plays with his legs, he is, he's a defensive nightmare for all the teams that he's going to be playing against. So again, we're not going to sit here and say that this has all the makings of an early indication that we're looking at a possible quarterback battle for Oklahoma going into this season. We're not saying that whatsoever. Jackson Arnold is the starting quarterback. He is the solidified QB1 for the Oklahoma Sooners. But anytime that you have a guy coming in as a true freshman, but also number two, you've got a guy at the quarterback position that can come in and be able to push the guys in front of him, whether it's the veteran Casey Thompson, whether it's the solidified starter in Jackson Arnold. Anytime that a guy like Michael Hawkins can come in and compete and push these guys, it's only going to make Jackson Arnold that much better. But from everything that we've heard and some of the things that we've seen from Michael Hawkins so far, out on the practice field, on Owen Field in the scrimmages, I mean, this kid's absolutely lighting up. And what many people thought was going to ultimately be a project, kind of a placeholder, for once Jackson Arnold's time is over. Make no mistake about it, Michael Hawkins is coming in. He's competing, and he's pushing for playing time. And God forbid if something were to happen to Jackson Arnold where, maybe he tweaks an ankle or, he's forced to miss 1 or 2 games. I think that coaches are going to have the confidence that they can go with a guy like Michael Hawkins to be able to throw him in there, feet to the fire, and he's going to be able to go out there and make plays and, maybe even win a ball game or two for Oklahoma this upcoming year. But make no mistake about it, Jackson Arnold is the starting quarterback this year. Look forward to watching 11 play. But Michael Hollins is absolutely balling.
Yeah, the interesting thing about spring practice is he does have the blue jersey on, so I don't think he's probably able to impress as much running wise as he normally would be. And when a guy comes in like Michael Hawkins, who is an athletic mismatch, a speed mismatch for linebackers, for defensive linemen, it's easy to rely on those aspects of your legs and being able to just get by in that manner. But I think Gabe Eicher had said this earlier in the week. He's obviously kind of started the parade on Michael Hawkins a little bit, but basically talking about, hey, his fundamentals are looking great. Like that's what you can see in action. And really the spring is the best time to work on those because you're not going to be running. You're not going to be scrambling all that much. You're going to be focused on, hey, I'm going to make the right reads. I'm going to make the right passes because I have that blue jersey on. I'm protected from pressure and sacks. So he's able to do that. So I think that puts up something kind of interesting. I'd love to hear people's, thoughts in the comments here of like, who should really be backing up Jackson Arnold this year? Is it a Michael Hawkins who probably has high ceiling, low floor? Or is it Casey Thompson who maybe won't be able to do a whole lot? We'll see how he looks after his injury and working his way back from that. But he's a guy that at least at one point in his career was slinging it all over an OU defense. I know that doesn't sound super impressive in 2021, but still, nonetheless, he was successful at Texas. He has, some success, but he's also kind of injured and he's gone through some stuff in his career. So how much left does he have in the tank? So I'm curious what other people might think about that, but certainly not a battle for first string, but maybe for second string. And that could have major implications as we've seen with Dylan Gabriel having injury troubles over the past 2 years.
Adam, I think one of the biggest comments, the thing that caught a huge amount of eyeballs that came out after the scrimmage on Saturday, and that was the fact that they thought that Michael Hawkins was further along at this point in his career at Oklahoma than Caleb Williams was when he was a freshman at Oklahoma. And again,
it's so unfair to him, right?
We're not sitting here saying that he's going to be the next Caleb Williams. I mean, if he is, he's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a first-round NFL draft pick. Great. That means Oklahoma is going to be a fantastic position here in the next couple of years. But I think the fact when you try to forecast, Adam, and you try to look at the quarterback room going into this upcoming season, what it's going to look like behind Jackson Arnold, that battle between Casey Thompson, who, like you said, Adam, he's a veteran. He's a guy that's been all of those big games. Yes, he is coming off of injury. How his health is going to be a huge concern. It's ultimately going to lead to maybe who is that solidified quarterback number 2 on the roster behind Jackson Arnold. But I'm always one of those guys where, if it's close, play the young guy because what you've got in Casey Thompson. He's a 1-year rental. He's a guy who's probably his biggest contribution. We know about his high football IQ. He's going to be a coach at the next level when his playing career is done. I mean, when you look at everything that's been talked about this kid, how knowledgeable he is about the game, how well he's able to communicate, both as a player and as a future coach. Casey Thompson is poised to be able to do both things once his playing career is done. But when it's this close, Adam, I tend to side with the younger guy. Michael Hawkins is a guy, his best football is ahead of him, his future over the next 4 to 5 seasons at the University of Oklahoma. If we're trying to split reps here, if we're trying to, battle out who's going to be given, maybe playing time and mop up duty, give me Michael Hawkins 10 times out of 10. So again, this kid is continuing to flash. He's continuing to do all the right things. He's working his tail off. He's, really impressing not just his coaches, but all of his teammates around him, building that confidence and that rapport with the guys on offense. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch Michael Hawkins in an Oklahoma uniform.
Absolutely. I know there's some other guys that have stood out from both scrimmage and practices, probably in the running back room there. Caleb Hicks being a guy that's getting a lot of praise right now. It's it's kind of a crowded room. You've got Gavin Sawchuk, who really finished the year strong. You've got Javante Barnes, who is saying he's healthy. Well, I want to see it to believe it there. Taylor Tatum not on campus yet. You've got Sam Franklin transferring in from UT Chattanooga. He had a little bit of a slow start to spring practice, but now he's starting to have some long breakaway runs when they get into that scrimmage setting. So a crowded room there, but several guys that are flashing.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the most refreshing takes that we've gotten from a couple of people when asking about, kind of what's going on the practice field and out, amongst the scrimmages. We know what Oklahoma has in Gavin Sawchuk. He's a guy that, has been the dude for each of the last 2 seasons at Oklahoma. When he's able to stay healthy, Gavin Sawchuk has been the best running back in an Oklahoma uniform. So, they're not going to do too much with him in spring practice. This has really just kind of been an opportunity for DeMarco Murray, for Joe John and Seth Luttrell to really be able to see what you've got in a guy like Javante Barnes coming off of a season a year ago where he was kind of bit by the injury bug, was never really able to get back to 100%. And then you've also got guys like a Sam Franklin that's transferred in, who's made his fair share of plays. You talked about the long run, Adam, in the scrimmage, and then Caleb Hicks, who really was the guy that I kind of wanted to talk about the most. I think that if you were to put a little bit of truth serum in DeMarco Murray's cup, Caleb Hicks has been the best running back for Oklahoma so far through the course of spring. He had 2 touchdowns in the scrimmage, both through the air and both on the ground as well. So Caleb Hicks, who make no mistake about it, since he's gotten to Oklahoma last year as a freshman, has looked fantastic in a jersey. He's been the best looking running back that we've got. Now he's finally starting to put it all together, and I think that Caleb Hicks is going to be one where DeMarco Murray, it's going to be hard to keep this kid off of the field once this thing kicks off here in about 5.5 months. So Caleb Hicks looks fantastic. We know what we've got with Gavin. Sam Franklin is another guy. Oh, and by the way, you've got a fully healthy Javante Barnes who feels the best that he ever has since he graduated and got to campus in Norman, Oklahoma. So DeMarco Murray signs his 3-year contract extension. He's, kind of rewarded with a plethora of talented running backs at his disposal. So running back position is loaded at Oklahoma. Surprise, surprise.
I don't want to talk a ton about the offensive line because I think there's a lot to shake out there, but Steelguard asks a good question there in the chat about how the offensive line is looking. We did hear from Brent Venables today about Troy Everett having surgery. It sounds like it's not a torn ACL because he's expected to be back hopefully by the end of fall camp, but that's a lot of time missed for what is presumed to be your starting center. So we'll see if OU finds some options there in the transfer portal. I think overall the offensive line, the sentiment seems to be that yeah, it's a work in progress, and Bill Beanbo is testing out a lot of different guys. But also, I think at the same time, you're seeing some really good things happen opposite them on the defensive side of the ball. And I know it's a little bit of give and take. If a receiver catches the ball, was it bad coverage or is it just a great receiver play? It's hard to tell when you're going up against yourself. But you look at, all the rave reports we've heard about Jane Jackson, about Caden Woolard. And then earlier tonight, Brent Venables saying that there's not a more humble, hardworking guy on our team right now than David Stone. That's been tweeted out by a friend of the show, Parker Thune. And so we're hearing a lot of great things about that defensive line and what it's able to win so far in spring practice and the scrimmages just as of right now. So I think the offensive line will definitely take more and more time. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't hear any good reports about them throughout the entire spring.
Well, Adam, on the contrary, I think despite all of the sunshine that you hear being pumped out there by certain people about this offensive line, they do have a pretty long ways to go to get to where the standard that Bill Beanbo holds these guys to. I think that, when you really try to dissect this thing, I think that there's a couple of individual pieces that Oklahoma feels really good about right now on the offensive line. Fabici and Nwewu and Heath Ozeta are obviously the 2 guys that come to mind when talking about these. Nwewu, the transfer from North Texas, he's a guy that's came in and from day one has really kind of asserted himself to where it's going to be damn near impossible for him not to be one of those 2 starting guards. And Heath Ozeta is a guy that really kind of fell off of people's radar a year ago. We haven't really seen him have too many snaps whatsoever, but he's a guy that was able to take full advantage of last season, a full off season with Jerry Schmidt. He's put on really good weight. He's able to put things together mentally, and he's freakishly strong from some of the videos that have been put out there by some of the guys on the beat, particularly the one-on-one that he had last week. You can see the tools that this guy possesses to where he could be that next, that next draft pick that Bill Beanbo is going to have here over the next 1 to 2 seasons. So Nwewu and Heath Ozeta have been, probably the 2, shining moments where they are poised to be the 2, interior starting guards on this offensive line. But then there's really a lot of uncertainty right now about how the other 3 guys are gonna kind of piece this thing together. Obviously, Troy Everett, losing him just 2 to 3 weeks into spring practice. He had the brace. If anybody saw, I think it was the George Stoya that tweeted out a little bit earlier today the picture of him at practice, still in full pads, but he did have that pretty severe brace on that knee. So he's a guy that will require surgery. They're hoping to have him back by the end of spring football. But, even though you never want to count a kid out because, ultimately this kid, puts all of his blood, sweat, and tears, 110% effort into his craft, but you would just have to kind of try to forecast, okay, where does Oklahoma go from here at the center position? Is it a guy like Josh Bates who hasn't taken a snap in an Oklahoma uniform, still extremely young, still extremely raw? Does Oklahoma, look to get more involved in the transfer portal? Obviously, the spring college football transfer portal window officially opens up on Tuesday, April 16th. That goes for about 2 weeks before it closes on the 30th. So there have been some rumblings out there about maybe one for sure, maybe even two offensive linemen that could be looking to possibly make the transition from their current program to the University of Oklahoma. We'll ultimately see how that plays out as the month of April goes along. But yeah, Adam, I think that as you sit here right now on April 2nd, it's never as good as you think it is, but it's also at the same time, it's never as bad as you think it is as well. Oklahoma's got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of young guys in there, a lot of really unproven guys in Oklahoma uniform. Jake Taylor, Jacob Sexton, Michael Tarquin, Spencer Brown. There's a lot of good quality pieces that Bill Beanbo has the opportunity to kind of play with right now. It's just a matter of how do you spend the rest of spring practice and over the course of that, 6 to 7 weeks of fall camp, trying to find that starting five, that 6-7 man rotation that you can feel good about once this thing kicks off.
Yeah. Anyone else from football side of things that you want to highlight here before we talk about some potential transfers on the hardwood?
Yeah, I think that really, Teddy talked about this a little bit, and I know that there's been a few other Owls that have kind of, had the opportunity so far to kind of get down there field level and see the way that some of these guys have continued to develop. And I think that Zach Alley leading the way. I think that, Adam, this has the opportunity to be the best Oklahoma defense since Brent Venables' early defense back in the early to mid 2000s. So again, I think. And again,
the bar.
I'm not sitting here saying that we've got a Tommy Harris, Gerald McCoy, Roy Williams, Teddy, Rocky Calmus, things like that. I'm not sitting here saying that, but I think that when you look at Oklahoma's defenses over the last 2 years, I mean, we followed this religiously. We know what defense has been like at Oklahoma, especially during the Tebow era. To where really defense has been kind of an option, not necessarily a necessity for Oklahoma to win football games. But we're getting back to that, tough, tough ground and pound, gritty, hard-nosed football, that brand that Brent Venables has grown accustomed to bringing to whatever program that he's been a part of. And I think that for the first time in a long time, Adam, Oklahoma is stacked 2 to 3 deep at each position across all 11 spots of this defense. So again, you got to go out there, in between the lines, during when the bullets are flying. But I think that Oklahoma is poised right now to have their best defense in probably 10 to 15 years.
Definitely.
We'll see if that gets clipped, and we have to revisit that here in about 8 or 9 months. So
we'll see. I think there's obviously it's off season. It's always hard to sort through and kind of sift through, like, okay, what's being overhyped and what's being underhyped. And definitely there's more excitement, I think, this spring than there was last spring, and there was a lot last spring. So I think we were a little cautious last year. I think now we're more willing to stick our neck out there a little bit and say, yeah, we believe this defense can actually be maybe as good as 2009 or in that same vein of, what that last great Venables defense was, in my opinion. We'll see. There's a lot to go. There's a lot to prove. It's a tough schedule. So, they may not have the same stats as some other great defenses because they'll play so many good teams, but they'll definitely be effective, in my opinion. So there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, comment in the chat here. Weston Sloan asks, any news on Garen Hatchett? Still kind of banged up right now. Obviously hasn't been able to get out on the practice field. But ultimately, as summer progresses, once we get into fall camp, I think that Hatchett's going to be a guy that, he should have all the makings to be one of those starting 5 offensive linemen. It's just going to be up to Bill Beanbo whether or not, not whether or not he is going to be able to get it done, but how quickly is Bill going to be able to find, those 5 or 6 guys that he can rely on once this thing kicks off. Had another comment here. Wide receiver room is pretty stacked. Ivan Carrion might find himself on the field a lot. Early reports out there. Adam, take this one. What do you think?
Okay. When I see a wide receiver wearing number 24, I immediately think of DeJuan Miller. He played in 2010 2009-ish or so.
Yeah.
And he was a tall guy, just like Ivan Carrion. So I have a little bit of PTSD from that because he had moments where he was really good. And then he had, just probably an overall little bit of a letdown of a career from a broader scheme of things. So we'll see. I don't know. I still wonder, but I know that Emmitt Smith, he's already proved, I think, with Jaden Gibson, and there's a lot of buzz about him as well in regards to having a great spring so far. But he's shown, I think, that he's able to utilize some of those bigger receivers and develop them more effectively than the past probably decade of OU big receivers before that. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, there's so many guys there in that room already that are upperclassmen that have already proven something. I think it's going to be tough for Ivan to break through, but hey, you never know. I mean, injuries have happened before and guys have come out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, this is absolutely no shade or anything being thrown at Ivan Carrion. I mean, when you look at this football team, the overall makeup of this roster, I think that the wide receiver position is one of which it is the deepest group on this football team. And it's probably going to be the position group where it's going to be the hardest for a new guy like a true freshman to be able to come in and crack that 1 or 2 man rotation each position. But we'll see how this thing plays out. Obviously, you've got Nick Anderson, you've got Jaden Gibson, a couple of guys that are of those bigger frames. They are a little bit bigger in size and stature. So Ivan's got a little bit of a tough uphill climb to be able to kind of take some snaps away from some of those guys. But we'll see what Ivan's able to do.
Let's talk a little bit about basketball. And there's been some bad news today, but I think let's start a little bit more on the positive side of some potential guys, and I'll highlight a few here that could be on the radar as far as transferring to OU. Several of them, actually all 3 of them, from the state of Oklahoma. So they've got some ties there. We'll start at Virginia Tech with Sean Padula. He's a guy that averaged 16 points per game last year for the Hokies. He's a guy that went to Edmond Memorial High School, probably a little bit overlooked by not only Oklahoma, but maybe all of college basketball as a whole, ending up there in Blacksburg. But he's a guy that could certainly fill up the score for OU with his spot-up shooting. He can hit off the dribble a little bit, an effective shooter from three-point range. So that's certainly one that you'd like to add for the Sooners, potentially out of the transfer portal. Next up, he actually just visited Oklahoma today as Kevin Overton. I think we'll flip over to one of his highlights here for those watching on YouTube in just a second. He's actually from Midwest City. He went to Sunrise Christian. That might sound familiar. Buddy Hield potentially there, but he ended up at Drake early on in his career here as a freshman. I think he was pretty solid for the Bulldogs up there in Des Moines. Averaged, 11 points per game. So I think he's a solid piece that as he continues to develop, could be a nice addition for the Sooners as well. So we'll see if Oklahoma is able to get those. Those guys are going to be guards. They're going to be on the perimeter. I love what Overton's showing here for those watching on YouTube. A little bit of a mid-range game there in his arsenal. So I think those guys can certainly add a lot to Oklahoma. And then the question becomes, okay, what can you get from the portal when it comes to a big man? And here's Brandon Garrison out of Oklahoma State that could be, a potential for OU. Let's see how things play out. I think there's going to be a battle here because he's a guy that while statistically he might not be the most impressive, he was a freshman last year for the Cowboys, but he's going to develop. He's going to continue to get better. His points per game might not wow you right now, but that's certainly a piece. We need a guy with a lot more length, a lot more athleticism. No disrespect to Sam Godwin, but he's a guy that I think is best suited coming off the bench and just really mucking it up in the paint there like he did in year 1 as a Sooner and not have as much of that starting burden as he did this year as a Sooner. So we'll see what Oklahoma's able to get. Those are probably the top 3 guys that you would most like to see here in a Sooner jersey coming up next year. But I mean, right now, you're battling all these guys that have left Norman so far, and some of that could be NIL related. Some of it just could be, hey, the overall mood of the program and not feeling like, hey, I should stick around and see if this team can make it to an NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Adam, and that's kind of one of the saddest parts about the current situation that Porter Moser finds himself in. I mean, you kind of look at the roster mathematics, kind of the different, who's coming in, who's going out since this season came to an end. I mean, you just look at it. Javion McCollum is just the latest in a handful of guys that have chosen to leave the University of Oklahoma. He enters the portal a little bit today to go along with guys like Milos Uzan, Otega Owe, John Hughley. So that's 4 starters for Oklahoma I'll call them starters as well. Those are 4 starters from Oklahoma's lineup, from this past season that are now choosing to take their talents to explore the options that are out there and try to play elsewhere. They lose Rivaldo Suarez to graduation. They lose, Trey Darthard to graduation as well. And you really only have 2 guys that are going to be coming in to join this program currently in Kual Attack and Dayton Forsyth. So you've got 6 or 7 that have left. You've got 2 that are coming in. So that's 5 open spots that Porter Moser is going to have to fill before next semester kind of kicks off here. So, and then also, Adam, we really haven't even talked about where does Oklahoma go from here, because they're still waiting on the decision. There's still a couple of guys out there who have a decision to make, like a Jalen Moore, like a Caden Cooper. We think that Caden Cooper is going to be coming back. Haven't really heard any solidified answer from Jalen Moore. If Porter Moser cannot convince Jalen Moore to come back, and honestly, if you're Jalen Moore right now, what really is there positivity-wise that would convince you to really want to come back to Oklahoma next year? All the guys that you played with a year ago, they're gone.
I think you could argue with Jalen Moore, he had his best year in a Sooner uniform by far. Like, he was at Georgia Tech for a while. He was kind of okay, maybe not being utilized right. And then he gets to Oklahoma, and Porter Moser kind of unlocks what his full potential was. Maybe that was because he had to be the guy in some games. So we'll see. But maybe he feels like, hey, like, I had my best year in Oklahoma. Like, I kind of want to keep that going, and disrupting that and potentially changing that doesn't really help in that momentum there. So I obviously you'd love to see him come back, because he's part of that front court. He can stretch it a little bit from the 4. He might even be able to play the 5 at times as well. And then if you can add some good pieces around him, like a Sean Padula from Virginia Tech, who's proven that he can do this at a power conference, score more points per game than what Javian McCollum did as a Sooner, I think that can really get you a little bit excited. But you would love to have Sean Padula and Javian McCollum, obviously. And so you're just in this constant rebuild mode and for Porter Moser, it's been, okay, we go to, Siena College to get Javian McCollum. We go to Nevada to get Grant Sherfield. We go to North Texas. I think Mo Gibson may have come in when on Lon Kruger's final year, but it's kind of been a rotation of, mid-major conference guys coming up to Oklahoma. They put up great stats in the non-conference. They take a step back against Big 12 play. They get, a little bit abused defensively because they're undersized. And then they may disappear in some games. And I don't want that to continue. I feel like Sean Padula could be a guy that could help break that trend a little bit. But if you're just constantly trying to fill these roster spots, and OU doesn't have the NIL to play with that most other schools do, the outlook, again, like most OU fan base, and we saw this 2 weeks ago when we did basketball as our headline story, it was our least viewed podcast maybe ever on YouTube. A week later, we had, over, 3,000-4,000 people watching our YouTube. We just put football up there. So the fan base is out on that. I don't blame them. It sucks. There's not a whole lot of hope and things to be excited about.
Well, it really puts the coaching staff, Porter Moser especially, it kind of backs them into a corner, because anytime that you're having to essentially spend an entire offseason having to really just kind of put your roster back together in pieces, pretty much after having it wiped completely clean of the slate. So, it's difficult to build a program whenever you're constantly having to do that year after year. There's no continuity. You're not able to build momentum. There's a new group, in that locker room every single year. So, again, it's a tough situation for Porter Moser, who, again, the seat's already pretty warm at this point right now, not making the NCAA tournament each of his first 3 seasons. So Oklahoma fans really aren't going to give him any slack when it comes to, overall performance of this program going forward, especially in year 1 in the SEC. But like you alluded to, Adam, the fact that Oklahoma does have 5 spots to be able to fill, I know that they're not going to be able to compete with some of the upper echelon teams in NCAA basketball, just because a lot of the programs that are, higher up there that are going to be more premier destinations, whether it is a Kansas, who, again, it's a basketball school, or maybe a program like Gonzaga, basketball school, UConn, Villanova, where all of the resources for those particular athletic departments are primarily being pumped into the sport of basketball. But like you said, you mentioned a few guys at the beginning of the segment, Adam, like a Sean Padula from Virginia Tech, Oklahoma guy. It's imperative that you're able to get him back and put him in an Oklahoma uniform this year, because not just because, he has an opportunity to be your starter day one, but he's a guy that many people think, myself included, he's an upgrade as a shooter at that position as well. And that's been something that has been so dreadful watching Oklahoma's offense each of the last couple of seasons. It's just they have the lack of consistency being able to shoot the basketball night in and night out. So if you can go out there and you can get a Padula, you can get an Overton from Drake, and if you're able to hit the lottery and you can bring in Garrison from Oklahoma State, then yeah, you might have something that Porter Moser can, whether it's glue, whether it's duct tape or Gorilla Tape, whatever, you might be able to put together a pretty formidable team going into next season. But I mean, the deck is stacked against him. I feel bad for Porter Moser, honestly. Obviously, it's just a tough situation all the way around. When he left Chicago Loyola, and obviously the transfer portal NIL wasn't what it was when he decided to come to Oklahoma. But make no mistake about it, I feel bad for the guy. And we can talk about President Harris's quote that came out a little bit earlier today with the OU Daily. Because that's something that is just not going to help Porter Moser's case whatsoever. And if you're a head coach, why would you want to come coach basketball at Oklahoma with the current layout and the landscape that is the city of Norman, the university not being able to get along, to get a deal put together for this?
Yeah, the comment you're referencing there is basically, it sounded to me kind of like an ultimatum, but he said, hey, if this doesn't go through with Norman and this entertainment district with the arena for Oklahoma basketball, then we'll have to take a look at other cities, basically alluding to more in Oklahoma City. I took that as kind of like an ultimatum, but I would love to hear the pulse of like OU fans in the comment section there. Like, would you want that potentially? Like, if it's going to be over at Rock Creek and 24th and Norman, why not just put it in more at that point, or even Oklahoma City somewhere? Like I live up in Edmond, so I'm like, hey, great. Like that's closer to me. I'd probably make a few more games. I know there would be fewer students, but hey, like there's no students at a Thunder game either. Like you can make a great atmosphere without students. You'd still get some. I mean, nothing's great at this point. Like there's no great option, but hey, I'd take a new arena in Oklahoma City if like that would be at least a step forward. It's probably not the right step, but hey, it could create some sort of momentum and excitement when there's really just nothing going on with basketball.
Adam, really, I mean, just in college athletics as a whole, how many programs out there that are, in the upper half of their sport that play in an off-campus arena that's in a different city? I mean, I can think of Miami football, their arena or their football stadium. It's not on campus. It's a good half hour to 45 minutes away. What's really out there?
So this is actually good. I grew up in Raleigh. NC State's campus is separated from both basketball and football arena and stadium there.
It's working for them.
It's about 3.5 miles away. It's about 10-minute drive, no traffic. So it's close. I consider it more like the Rock Creek proposal there in Norman, but it works. Like football games, very well attended for NC State. Basketball games, same thing. Obviously, you have some great opponents in Duke and North Carolina coming to the PNC Arena there in Raleigh. So it works out. Students find a way to get there. It's certainly not walkable, even like the Lloyd Noble Center is. So they find a way to make it work. Obviously, they share that arena with the Carolina Hurricanes. So it is a very nice facility. So I think if you can build that nice facility, then I think fans can be a part of that. Almost anything is better than the Lloyd Noble Center at this point, like almost anything. So we need something that's going to pump some life into this program.
And I know that there's a lot of debate out there. Everybody wants to throw out their idea on how you fix this. I mean, obviously women's basketball is not having any problem whatsoever. And again, I'm not sitting here saying that, the LNC needs to be renovated. No, I'd blow the thing up, start over. If you want to turn it into a parking lot for football, I would do something else.
It's a bunker. It might be defensible to bombs, potentially. It looks like a bunker.
Which, I mean, Adam, we might have a little bit different perspective. I mean, we worked in the athletic department. We sold tickets. We tried anything and everything possible to, up the turnout for basketball. In the LNC, I mean, that was kind of one of the rebuttals time and time again from fan bases is, we hate the arena. It's not easily accessible. Even once you're inside the building, it's not accessible from fans coming, from Oklahoma City because you got to go down Highway 9. It's really tough to make some of those 6:00 games during the midweek. I don't know. I've seen some people that have, kind of thrown out the possibility of possibly renovating McCaslin, throwing tens and tens of $1 million into that. I like the overall idea of that with the fact that it is an on-campus arena. It's just a couple of blocks away from Campus Corner. That does make sense, but I still think that overall, I think that the best overall route that Oklahoma should go is if you are able to build that new arena with that entertainment district a little bit further up there in North Norma, kind of off of, Robinson and Rock Creek, kind of in there in that in between. And that's what I thought was so interesting about President Harris's, comments that kind of came out today, where he said, if this isn't approved by the city council for whatever reason, then we're going to be looking at other cities. To me, I don't see where it makes any sense for Oklahoma to put this thing in Moore or to put this thing all the way up in Oklahoma City. You might be able to have a little bit better turnout in there in Oklahoma City just because the population density is so much higher in OKC compared to Norman, but that still doesn't do anything to solve the problem with the student turnout. And I will give Porter Mosier credit. He worked his ass off over the last year to, get out there in front of the students, get out there in front of the sororities and the fraternities to be able to get that fan engagement back. But I mean, make no mistake about it, I think that this is kind of an empty threat that President Harris kind of threw out there. And this is really just kind of a last-ditch effort for Oklahoma on the university side to be able to kind of tell the city of Norman that, hey, we're sick and tired of waiting on this. Let's either come to the table and let's get this deal done, or we're just going to kind of forego this altogether and we'll find a new solution.
Yeah. Someone that did find a new solution was softball. They're playing in a new stadium in Loves Field. But they'll be on the road for the second straight weekend down in Austin against Texas. The ladies really just blitzed Kansas up in Lawrence, made it so it wasn't really much of a matchup after that first or even second inning. And I think that's kind of the recipe against Texas too, is like get on them early, take the stress off of your pitchers. So, Texas is a team that has some good pitchers, some that we're familiar with, and like Estelle Sheck, for example, but they've also got some good ones in Mac Morgan, who I think is probably their best pitcher, single-digit walks for the year. Played against OU last year, didn't have the greatest outing necessarily, but really no pitcher did against Oklahoma's lineup at all last year. So Texas, though, I think is very formidable. They're number 5 in the country. They've got a really great team there that probably will stretch OU as a softball program. We've seen OU go up against Duke and Washington so far. We've seen them play some other teams that are in the tournament, but maybe in smaller conferences. So I think this is a really, really big test for Oklahoma that I still have some concerns and questions about. And now I think we'll probably be able to get some answers as they go down to Austin.
Big week for Patty Gasso's squad, and I think one of the things that was good about this past weekend up in Lawrence was that you were able to continue riding the wave of momentum that Oklahoma's generated since they lost that game a little bit earlier this year. Oklahoma sweeping number 24 Kansas on the road, outscoring the Jayhawks 30-4 over those 3 games. And, Adam, it kind of feels like this is just going to be a stat that we just continue to add on to as we do this episode or as we do this show each and every week. Over the first 12 games of Big 12 play, Oklahoma softball has outscored their conference opponents by a whopping 126-18. And now all eyes turn down to Austin for the top 5 showdown this weekend with the Longhorns. The good thing about this for Oklahoma, if you want to really even try to, paint a brighter picture than what it already is that we saw, over the course of the weekend up in Lawrence, you saw the big guns, starting to fire on all cylinders. On Sunday's game alone, the big 4 of Jada Coleman, Kinsey Hansen, Tiari Jennings, Alyssa Brito, 10 for 16, 3 home runs. They accounted for all runs that Oklahoma put on the board. So again, this is going to be a huge weekend because I think that this is going to be the series that we've had scheduled for a long time now, kind of especially since the Duke and Washington games, where the OU Texas series was going to be the matchup where we truly find out what the status, how elite or good or dominant is OU's pitching staff collectively, 1 through 3, maybe even 4 here. We know what we've got in Kelly Maxwell. You know what you've got in Nicole May. But Kirsten Deal, Peyton Monticelli, this is the weekend on the road down in Austin against a top 5 team. They're either number 4 or number 5, depending on which poll that you're looking at. I know that Texas is coming off of a series in which they lost 2 out of 3 to Oklahoma State, but all of those games were really competitive. They lost 5-0 on Friday night. They won 2-1 on Saturday, and then they ultimately lost the rubber match on Sunday 3-0. So again, what's a pitcher's best friend? It's a deadly, timely hitting offense. So I think that if Oklahoma's offense can go out there, especially on Friday night, you would have to expect that it's going to be Kelly Maxwell getting the ball in the circle when they take on Texas on Friday. If Oklahoma can go out there and, put up 3 or 4 runs in the first inning, or even just get Kelly Maxwell in a position where she doesn't have to pitch from behind, or, she's able to really kind of calm down a little bit and, really just kind of go out there and execute and throw strikes. But again, I don't expect, Mike Brown's team, you put the tweet out a little bit earlier today, Adam, finger and all. Again, as good as Texas's softball team has been this year, I think that this is going to be a series where if Oklahoma shows up and they play Oklahoma softball, and we know that Patty's got them focused, they're ready to go. It get the broom out again. Same song, different verse.
I don't know if I'm feeling that bold right now. Now, you mentioned the pitchers and the matchup there. I think that's what I'm going to be keeping my eye on as far as, and maybe even the key to the game there is Jolie Mitchell, Ashton Maloney, Caden Henry out of the Texas dugout there. Those are your top 3 hitters in terms of batting average, but only 11 combined home runs amongst those 3.
Sure.
So it's something where I feel like, hey, if this OU defense shows up and plays to their potential, and we talked a little bit about this last week, their fielding percentage has been good, but maybe not as good as last year. Obviously a high bar. The team basically doesn't make mistakes most of the time, but if we can get some great play out of those middle infielders there and limit the errors, I like our chances there because I think Kelly Maxwell and Nicole May, as long as they're not putting free runners on base, like this could be like a really coming out party, a little bit of a solidification of, yeah, they really are the best team in the country. And it doesn't matter that, they haven't played as tough a schedule as they have last year. So seeing some of that, I think against a really good ball club in Texas would be lovely to see, because I still certainly have questions about pitching and where they are there. And is that enough to carry them, not just to Oklahoma City, but to win it all again for a 4th time in a row?
And Adam, I know that the easy thing for Oklahoma fans to do is to read online that, okay, Texas lost 2 out of 3 to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma's going to go in there and just steamroll them down in Austin this weekend. That was a tough, hard-fought series. Oklahoma State, even without Kelly Maxwell, that is still a really, really good softball team up there in Stillwater that Kenny Gillespie is coaching. And again, this is a Texas team that even though they lost 2 out of 3 in Stillwater, they still have really quality wins over the likes of Tennessee, over UCLA. They beat Stanford a little bit earlier this year. This is a good Texas softball team that Oklahoma's going to have to go in there and play their A game if they're going to get out of Austin with the series win.
Absolutely.
It's Adam, another team that needs to.
I was going to say that's all the time we have for today. Or do we need to talk about baseball?
No, we need to touch on baseball. Adam's Optimism back for I want to say the 2nd straight week. You were pretty high on Oklahoma going into the last weekend against Lamar, thinking that at the bare minimum you win that series. You possibly even look for a sweep. Adam, what's wrong, dude? Where are we at? Where do we go from here?
I think it's a compounding of bad injury luck meeting actual bad play on the field. In terms of, you're making dumb decisions in base running and coaching and how you put and pull pitchers out of the game, just in errors, things that used to be routine seem to be a little bit hard for the team against Lamar. A good ball club in Lamar, probably one that's going to be in the postseason representing the Southland Conference. But overall, just an ugly weekend. One you want to forget there. And now, as we record, they're up 4-1 against Wichita State. They're threatening to score a little bit there in the bottom or top of the 7th. So we'll see how that one ends up. So far, I like the response and mentality that I've seen out of the Sooners so far tonight. They're manufacturing some offense. They're getting some good pitching. Will Carson was able to get into the game and pitch a little bit and raise his confidence despite giving up 1 run. Jamie Hitt, same thing, came in, struck out 2 pitchers in the inning that he pitched earlier. So I think raising the confidence and just kind of resetting the mentality of this team is really huge as you go into a really big series in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. Overall, like where the team sits today, you lost your series to Lamar in West Virginia, but you swept your series against UCF and TCU, and it doesn't really make sense. It seems like it should be opposite. And so that the ceiling's very high for this team. They just have to rise up to meet that. Even without John Spikerman, and it sounds like Carter Frederick might be out for the year at this point, there's still a really high ceiling here. And there's not really anyone in the Big 12 that I think is going to stand in their way. I don't think there's a World Series team in the Big 12 right now. So the opportunity is there for Oklahoma. They're still at the top of the Big 12 standings. They're still top 30 in the RPI. They have the number 1 strength of schedule. So there's not really any team that's going to scare you in the conference, but also at the same time, there's not going to be too many breaks. There's not too many teams that you're going to coast to a series win against. So just got to get the right mentality going forward. And maybe this is the reset they need up in Wichita before they head down to Stillwater.
Adam, anytime that you lose a series at home to West Virginia, and then you lose a series, you get swept by Lamar. It's hard to try to find any a silver lining or any good pieces, any good tidbits to kind of take away from it. So if you're Skip Johnson right here, and obviously they're in the middle of a midweek game right now where they're up on Wichita State, but as you're trying to get your guys back on track with that big series against your rival in Oklahoma State this upcoming weekend in Stillwater, I don't want to just simply say pitch better, hit better, but what is Oklahoma? Where's the biggest downfall for Oklahoma right now? Is it the arms on the mound? Is it lack of production, consistently 1 through 9 in the lineup? Is it lack of timely hitting? What's really kind of been kind of the thorn in Oklahoma's side over the last couple of weeks, and what do they need to do to kind of fix things to get it back on track?
I know people want to focus on pitching. I'm not as concerned about that, especially in the weekend, because last week was Easter. We had the series moved up a day, and you had Kyson Witherspoon entering the starting lineup, but you had him going in game 3 on Saturday so that he can go on game 2 Saturday going forward. So that will help tremendously in Stillwater. Just having your best pitcher, really, in my opinion, going on game 2, I think that helps change the series. You can still lose Friday, but you can get back on track with Kyson Witherspoon on Saturday, or maybe that's the opportunity to seal a series if Braden Davis is on fire, like we've seen he has that capability of doing the combined no-hitter against West Virginia. So I think that tremendously helps. As far as your hitting lineup goes, it hurts that Spikerman's not there. I think you'd still like to find a way to get more production out of that back half of the lineup, though, because right now, between Jason Walk, whether you throw Isaiah Lane at third base, or whether you go with Jackson Willits at shortstop, or even Scott Mudler. Scott Mudler's been a little bit better than those three, but you're probably putting someone in the lineup right now that is hitting sub 200. So we got to figure out some production there. Jason Walk has had some nice hits, but also some really bad at-bats where he's watching strike 3 come in. That's happening quite a bit. So it's just finding someone in there. Rocco hasn't played a whole lot. Rocco Garza Gongora, best name on the team, in my opinion. I would love him to play better so I can say his name more often. But yeah, just not a lot of production there at the end of the lineup to flip things over. And it's really, I think, putting the strain on your Bryce Madrons, your Michael Snyders, and those guys have been playing well. Jackson Nicholas also playing really hot right now. But, at some point, those guys are going to cool off a little bit. And so we need some other guys to start creating more of that regular momentum throughout the lineup. So hopefully a hostile environment, a good team in the other dugout in Oklahoma State can really help this team focus and come with the right mentality.
Hopefully it's going to be a fantastic weekend for both teams on the dime this upcoming weekend, both in Stillwater and in Austin. Adam, get us out of here.
Yep. Thanks everyone for listening or watching and making us part of your weekly routine. We'll be back next week for the next episode of The Main Line.